The Audacity of She. Incisive conversations with women who are challenging the status quo to create wildly fulfilling lives. Plus, practical information you can apply to your life right now. Hi, thanks so much for joining me. I am really excited to share this conversation with evolutionary astrologer Kristin Fontana. Now, I would urge you that even if you know nothing about astrology or evolutionary astrology, or even if it runs contrary to your personal beliefs, that you give this conversation a try. Kristin has been one of the most profound teachers I've had in my life, and this conversation is really impactful for me. It's hard for me to listen to it without tearing up in a few key places. So I think if you open yourself up, you'll really enjoy the content. So what we talk about is evolutionary astrology and how it differs from traditional astrology. We talk about Kristin's transition from being a mainstream girl in corporate America to evolutionary astrology as she began to ask the bigger questions of what is. We also talk about how evolutionary astrology can help us to heal our relationships with ourselves and with others. We talk about why it's so important to empower women to have the choice to follow what burns deep inside, and also how you can bring yourself as a woman into the world in the most actualized way possible. I really hope you enjoy this conversation, and I will see you on the other side. All right. Greetings, Kristin. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So today I just wanted to chat with you a bit about your path as an evolutionary astrologer, what that means, and how evolutionary astrology can help enhance our lives.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think
we'll go through one question at a time.
that will take the whole hour. But the bottom line really is, and I think the best way to just share how it just transformed my life was, and I've been doing astrology now. I've been an evolutionary astrologer since I was 33, and so it's been 19 years. And I was really searching. I was a corporate America girl. I took a very mainstream path. I went to UCLA and studied medicine, and I was very just very much feeling like, is this all there is? When this was occurring by the time what we call our Saturn return, which is when anybody's 28 or 29 years old, we go through this period of reflection where we're asking ourselves about what we've built up until this point, our commitments we've made, how we've spent our time. And the reflection is about, is this what I want for myself? And so at that time, around my late 20s and early 30s even, I felt that the life that I had created and built for myself wasn't exactly the way I thought it should feel. And while on paper everything looked perfect, my soul just felt empty. And I remember literally being on my knees, at different times and in tears. And I'm a very free-spirited person. I'm a Sagittarius and very fiery and passionate. And I wasn't familiar with the feeling of not being in a state of, honestly, like joy most of the time. I definitely found a way to be happy in my life most of the time, whether it was, going for a run on the beach or spending time with friends and all of that. I mean, I just had a way of looking at life with the glass half full, and I loved a challenge. But all of a sudden, nothing was working at all. And so I was going through some major astrological transits at the time, I discovered, and I didn't grow up with astrology because I grew up in a very formal family, conservative, religious, where astrology was for the devil. I mean, if I got caught reading a forecast, I'd probably be in a lot of trouble. And so it really wasn't until my late 20s that I just started exploring everything. I was searching for meaning, frankly. And I would consider myself a spiritual person at that time, naturally spiritual. I really didn't align with any kind of religion. Of course, it just, to me, it was all about, breed intolerance between people and our God versus your God. None of that made any kind of sense to me. But I was a spiritual person, and I believe in the power of, connecting more deeply and into a larger force we call God. And, I felt that if I pounded on that door enough, eventually God would answer and help direct me. So it wasn't until I was 33 though. And when I met my teacher in evolutionary astrology, and I had been, as I mentioned, had been kind of dabbling in it in my late 20s up until that point. And I entered a lecture on Easter Sunday of all days. I was at an astrology conference when probably every year before that I was in church. And anyway, the room was packed and you could have heard a pin drop. I was sitting in the middle of the back. I felt like an alien myself there. I mean, I was, again, a corporate girl still, and everybody there was in Birkenstocks, I think. But it's great. But anyway, I didn't know a soul. I was just sitting there and searching for something to stick, and I was searching for answers. And as soon as the lecturer said good morning, the speaker, just the sound of his voice, I knew that I was home. It was it. I had this physiological response to his voice. And so it allowed all my walls to come down and my mind to go empty. And I don't remember so much what he said. I just remember how it felt. And everything that came out of his mouth was about something that I felt mattered. It was about truths, natural truths. It was simple yet intense, and something you wouldn't even question. It just resonated deeply with me. And so it wasn't so much about the astrology, it's just how the astrology reflected the soul's journey. And everybody's had their own experience, here on earth in terms of being at crossroads and questioning whether they made the right choice here or there. And so anyway, from that moment on, and I was working in corporate America at the time, but from that moment on, my life changed, and I worked fast and hard to change my life so I could do this work and leave the past behind, essentially, at least the corporate past, which I did around the age of 35.
Wow. So can you tell us a bit about evolutionary astrology? Maybe compare it to traditional astrology for those who don't have a lot of experience with either?
That's a great question. Evolutionary astrology looks at the chart. We use a paradigm that focuses a great deal on Pluto and the planetary nodes. They're these symbols that look like horseshoes in a chart, and they reflect the soul's past and the soul's future. And obviously all the planets are in a certain position as well when any soul is born, and the soul chooses its birth entrance. And so within the chart, you can map where the soul has been in other times, what the soul has come here to do, any soul's intentions for this life and why, any skipped steps that might be in place because of fear, avoidance, the need for security, and then where it is that the soul is headed and where the soul wants to go. And so what I loved about this work, because I had studied a bunch of astrology before I met my teacher, But a lot of traditional astrology I felt was very descriptive, and one size doesn't fit all, right? So I wanted to understand it from a more, well, in terms of, I would call it the Trinity of any soul's journey, not just who they are, right? Archetypically or personality. I wanted to know what the soul is about that created this life, and so I wanted to be able to answer the question, why am I here? Why is anybody here? And why this fear? And why that passion? And why this relationship? I wanted to know why. And what I felt astrology couldn't answer, traditional astrology, was that question, why?
Mm.
So evolutionary astrology is very much about a paradigm, not a philosophy. It's a body of work that can answer those deeper questions, those Scorpio questions, Pluto questions, which is, getting to the bottom of anything. And when we can try and fix whatever we want to on the surface, but it's never going to change what's going on deep inside of us. We can appear to make changes, but until we really get in there, get into the emotional corners of our being, not until we do that can we really evolve. We can't brush those things aside and pretend we've worked on them. So that is what really sold me. I mean, to be honest, Dana, like I never in a million years thought I would be an astrologer. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't on my radar the day I walked into that lecture on Easter Sunday, which, by the way, was on the subject Saturn. And Saturn has so much to do with our conditioning. It has to do with the structure of the society we live in, all the rules and dogmas that have been created most of the time by men, And so I had a lot of conditioning that I was experiencing, even sitting, when I showed up at that lecture, where my soul had been really running from who I was to protect myself from other lifetimes where who I was became a target, persecution, etc. Like most women have that story, like almost all women have some story of persecution in their chart. For me, a lot of the way that God made me and God designed me, in all its working parts, wouldn't fit into some normal society. I mean, even an astrologer, although it's much more accepted now, but, for forever it was, like those were the witches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, at some point in history, and some point in my history, when enough persecution happens, or how many women were burned at the stake, when enough pain happens, then the instinct is to survive. And so with survival comes suppression, repression, hiding behind your nature for fear of, dying for it. So, that to me is where evolutionary astrology was able to answer those questions, why, for me. And then the power of, with my own ability to grab a hold of this work and take it in as deeply as I could, I was able and am able to help other people answer that same question.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I will tell you, when I met with you one time, I knew that I believed in the idea of past lives for several years at this point, but I didn't have anything that made it like personally true for me, like experientially. I just had this faith in the concept. And then on this call with you, you mentioned these things about my past lives that, though I didn't know any of it, made this entire lifetime make sense. It was things that I had grappled with for so long. So how is it that through evolutionary astrology, you're able to do this, to actually peer into previous lifetimes?
Well, beyond understanding the symbols and what they mean, there's also a whole chart of other archetypes. It's about synthesizing and blending all of the archetypes so you can uncover the story. And, with many years of doing this work, my intuition is extremely strong. Being able to tune into certain things, it has really, it didn't happen overnight. It's come with a lot of time and travels in this work. But this paradigm is, when I say a paradigm, it's just literally like a model that allows you to work with any chart and build. It's like building blocks. You just keep adding ingredients. It's a little bit like baking a cake. You put flour and sugar and butter on the counter. Nobody knows what you're going to make, right? Until you start adding all of these ingredients. And that's really what it is. It's about blending all of these energies, understanding even historically the different longitude and latitude lines, perhaps where a soul has come through, what cultures, what countries. And you can speak for sure very early on in studying this work, you can speak to specific dynamics that you see in a chart right out of the gates, what someone would have gone through. Like, for example, maybe a woman would have been subjected to some kind of, arranged marriage, or, basically just being somebody's trophy wife and not being allowed to work. And so just having to play second fiddle to the man and taking care of all the needs at home or the family. And you'll see specific symbols for that right away. And of course, a lot of women, you might see this in their chart. But you can, depending on where these planets are falling and which house they're in, it can talk to how it happened, where, with who, and how much influence the family had, right, with who they ended up with, and how much power that woman had in terms of her own choices. You can see all these symbols. And so then what you do is you can go further to speak to more of the details of it and how long that woman perhaps has been trying to break free from that kind of pattern where she wasn't just marrying somebody because everybody else wanted her to. Maybe she was the last person she wanted to marry, or not even close to somebody she wanted to marry, but everybody else thought it was a good idea. So, I talk to plenty of women even today where, this story still exists. And then never really feeling like they were in love. So this is, one example of that. And another way that this work, I feel, is so powerful is that when you start merging charts with other people, like if, for example, if somebody wants to look at their relationship, and so then you can overlap the charts and you can see where these two have connected in other times. What have the dynamics been in the relationship before? What are the stumbling blocks? Where have they felt pinned? What are they coming here to work through now? And why did they call each other in to begin with? Because every one of us will attract somebody, whoever it is, whether it's a friend or a partner, that reflects the dynamics that our soul is working on. Energetically, we naturally draw them into our life. And so, of course, it takes tremendous amount of immersion in this work and study. I think it takes a certain type of receptivity, in a sense, too, and intuition. But I will tell you that if something comes in emotionally for me when I'm looking at a chart and I start to feel the story unveil itself, then I will immediately look to the symbols to make sure that what I'm feeling I can see in the chart. So I do feel to be able to give more color or present more color and detail to the story. You can't just be using your mental, faculties. You've got to be using you have to be tuning in emotionally, and the intuition, must be strong in order to really come full circle with the story.
Yeah, and that's incredibly powerful, because that first time that I talked with you, I think I was just wondering like what my next 6 months were going to be like or something like that. I just needed clarity because I felt like I was at this like crossroads, but you felt something. So we talked about that past life, and in that conversation, I experienced such a deep healing, not only for myself, but also through like forgiveness of other people, because all these things that I was so angry or ashamed or just felt so burdened with for so long, it's like when I understood my past lives and how those stories brought me to where I am now and why I needed to have those experiences in this lifetime to kind of resolve things, it just made everything make sense. And then it was more like gratitude for having the opportunity to experience that so that I could get to the next place I needed to be at.
I mean, you just gave me the chills with what you said. I literally have tears in my eyes because that was a long time ago when we spoke the first time. And for you to remember that, what I said had an emotional impact on you. You didn't just think about it. You felt the truth of what I was saying. And in essence, this is an evolutionary teaching, which is there aren't any victims. Every soul creates whatever reality it needs for itself in order to evolve. And you're right. At times there is a need to forgive others, and to ask yourself then, why did I need to create that for myself?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, of course, when hard things happen to people, it may be because in another life, they did something to call that in, but it doesn't always mean that. When a child is abused, it doesn't mean they were abusing someone else in another life. There's all sorts of reasons for anything to happen. But I would say in terms of, in the spirit of what you are doing with your work, the audacity of she, and in my work, so much of what I do and so much of what I am incredibly passionate about is empowering women, because everything has been so out of balance for thousands of years. I mean, women essentially used to be the shamans and the teachers. Men were actually pushing boulders around. Women had all the power, but it was natural power. It wasn't an abusive power. It was just natural order. And it wasn't until men discovered that they had an equal role in making a baby that they decided that they were going to do something about it. So for so long, we have been like second-class citizens or the underdog gender, call it what you wish. I mean, there's plenty of women who are taking their power back on the planet, for sure, but there's still so much going on in so many countries where you think that we haven't evolved at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was just watching a documentary on India, and just where the culture is there in terms of feeling like women's job is still to be at home and tending to a man and his needs and the children. It's still a very prevalent cultural norm and belief there. So,
I feel that though, even so much in the United States, it seems like it's just so embedded within our DNA to care for our families. I know I grapple with that a lot, just balancing a work and home life balance.
Right. Well, absolutely. I mean, but I'm speaking too of women who feel as well, if they do have to work, that they aren't treated equally, fairly, financially, right? Same job, less pay, all the things that go along with that. And there's nothing wrong with a woman wanting to stay home with their family and not working at all. To me, I mean, that is the most important job any woman will have, is to mother her children and to be there in every way that a mother can be for her family and for her partner. So it's more about just a woman having a choice, not being pigeonholed into a certain position in society where, she takes the back seat to a man every time. That's what I'm talking about. I just want women to have a choice, to be able to follow what it is that burns inside of them, that follow their bliss, to be able to have all the same opportunities that a man does.
Yeah. So speaking to that, then how do we use evolutionary astrology to make some of those decisions and to help enhance and inform our lives?
There's a lot of symbols that would speak individually to anyone about inherent gifts, things that soul might have naturally been drawn to do in other times because of their design. And there's a wonderful asteroid that I look to and have studied quite a bit. I've done lectures on her, called Lilith. And the asteroids sit in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. There's a lot of goddess asteroids that we use in astrology as well. And Lilith was considered to be Adam's first consort before Eve. And in mythology, that is who she was. And because she refused to lie beneath him, so to speak, she demanded equality. She was not wanting to be submissive to a man. In her natural form, she was independent, alluring, self-reliant, self-sustaining, and powerful in every way. And so because she refused to lie beneath him, she flew into the night in a fiery rage, never to return. So she got a bad rap because she wasn't playing that submissive role. And when you look at Lilith in a chart, it reflects a woman's natural design, how God made that woman, and in her natural form, where she can recover her greatest feeling of power and empowerment, and how she can bring who she is as a woman to the world, and, in the most actualized way possible. And so, for example, your original Lilith, and again, there's a couple other symbols in the chart. There's something called dark moon Lilith, black moon Lilith, but the original Lilith, which isn't an asteroid, a physical body, yours is in Virgo in the 12th house. I'll give you an example of how clear this is. And the 12th house has to do with healing. It has to do with, in this case too, shining a light on the dark. A Virgo is it is the underdog. It's helping those who can't help themselves. It's trying to help and heal those who are sick, whether it's emotionally sick or in pain or suffering. And that can be emotionally, psychologically. And you're built and born to make this world better than the way that you found it, essentially, to help resolve the negativity, the doubts, to empower women in particular, I would say. I say that because your moon, which governs your emotional nature, and it is you, the woman, moon, you have in Leo at the top of your chart. And Leo is essentially the planet that governs the heart chakra. It's very creative. And at the top of the chart, it reflects being on stage for women, or creating a stage for women, or helping empower women, or helping people connect with their creative life purpose. Because you've been able to do that. So then you can shine that light of love and passion and validation on these women yourself. And so I would say that in original times, you had a way of accessing the problem and finding a solution. You could see where things were breaking down, and then you had a way of helping elevate whatever it was or heal it. And, I would definitely say too that this would be a symbol for a medicine woman, even in certain lives. Having a lot of natural knowledge knowledge of how to help people. The medicine can come in many ways, whether it's a message you have for them. It can come through plant medicine. It can come through your touch. It can come through a lot of different vehicles. But being that you're a sun in Gemini, you've got Venus in Gemini, your North Node, which is your destiny, is in Gemini, and it sits all in the house of the soul. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which means that you're a messenger. At least in this life, that's what you are. And so back to this original Lilith, though, to me, it perfectly reflects your strengths. And you have a lot of strong energy connecting to wanting to be your own boss and the spirit of independence. Got a strong first house with Pluto sitting there, which is an Aries house, which is literally about being a front runner, a trailblazer, and leading a cause, leading a movement to help And well, not just women, but any soul evolve. I don't want to single men out here, but this is the audacity of she, right? So I know that's your audience. And by the way, Lilith in a man's chart reflects his ideal image of a woman before all the distortions, because a lot of men were taught to repress their emotions, and big boys don't cry and all these other things, which has created its own problems. And then there's a lot of rage and anger that results when a man has to suppress something that's natural. And so it can come out in a relationship. And, so there's so many things. Look at how much I talked about. I didn't plan on talking about your chart. I pulled it up and boom, I'm able to, with a little preparation, you could start to peel back layers and layers and layers. And Dana, when you can tune into something in a woman's chart in particular here, something that she knows in her soul is true about who she is, the things that light her up. If you can even shine a light on what lights her up, there you can't put a price tag on that.
Mm-mm.
I mean, that is something that will feed her forever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say right there is just hearing that reflected to me would make a whole reading with you so worthwhile. So for people who are listening to this, if you're curious to know what anything about anything that's happening in your life, you can truly use astrology just to get such a deep understanding of who you are. And I've experienced that firsthand so many times, Kristin, in particular, just working with you. So know that, oh my gosh, you are so valuable and so powerful. I'm so appreciative for you.
Well, thank you so much. But it's really the work that is, the work of evolutionary astrology is the gift. And I just feel honored to be able to bring it to others. It blows me away every day when I'm looking at charts or talking to people or looking at it for my own life, for my own family. And I see key turns and transitions showing up in the chart. And I just come out of my shoes. I'm just so grateful that there's something like this that exists that allows us to validate who we are or objectify why we're going through something. There's so much comfort in being able to objectify why. Mm-hmm. So we don't attach to the emotion of it. So it doesn't bury us or drown us in something that is meant to liberate us.
Yeah. So how often do you recommend somebody work with an evolutionary astrologer? Or does that differ?
It's really specific to the person, because sometimes I'll meet with people that are going through a tremendous amount in their life. Maybe they're losing someone they love or going through a divorce, or they can't get pregnant. They're having relationship issues. And the frequency depends on the intensity of what's going on for any soul. But, it's really, I would say anything from, I talk to people, on their birthdays at times, sometimes quarterly. I'll talk to people. Sometimes years will go by and they'll call me again. And so it just depends. And people ask me that all the time. When should I call you again? But so much what I say in a reading is meant to stick with someone for a long time. I want to present something that will allow the soul to work on what I presented and to always return back to this original reading, because the root of the issues, or the root of the intentions, and the root of what the soul needs to do will be in that original reading. And of course, things will be repeated over time because there are specific intentions that any soul has in their life. But we're always working on a lot of different things along the way. So it's, whenever they feel like they've worked through something and they're coming up for air and they're ready for more, then I typically hear from them again. But there's no norm, and it's just different for everybody. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I listened to one of my recordings just over and over, not so much in a row, but over time. So then my understanding of it has deepened. Absolutely,
Oh,
because you
that's
hear it
so
in a
true.
different way.
It is so true. I have to say, like, what you're ready to hear at the moment will change months later. You hear it again. And because you've grown and you've deepened in your walk and your path and you've gotten stronger in yourself, then you can see it with a completely different pair of eyes. You can feel it on a deeper level. And all these archetypes from Aries all the way to Pisces, all the way through the zodiac, there's so many levels and layers of what each archetype means that you can't just put it in a box, so to speak. Every single archetype looks different as it evolves. And so as you evolve, you'll experience more of the chart kind of coming to life, and you'll see, wow, I can see my Gemini stuff over here manifesting in this way. And, I, in a different way than it used to, because even when you look at, say, for example, even your sun sign in Gemini, an evolved version of a sun in Gemini looks very different than a consensus version of a sun in Gemini. So, like a sun in Gemini, I would say in a consensus reality is somebody who's very curious. Of course, every Gemini in any stage of evolution is curious, but a lot of times when it's in maybe a distorted manifestation of it, might be somebody who talks a lot because they're nervous they don't want to go into those deeper conversations or issues. So they'll talk a lot in order to distract people from from whatever it is that they're avoiding within themselves. And it can just be too that Sun in Gemini just is so curious, and they have this need for diversity that they're just collecting as much information as they can from their world. Now, an evolved Sun in Gemini, as I mentioned earlier, they're like messengers for people. They're able to take all this information that they have collected and bring it into in your case, I would say some bottom line messages. Your sun sits in a Scorpio house, so it's not feeding, it's just channeling all this information into a tunnel or a funnel of something that is actually substantial. That's how it evolves. And it's like weaving it or braiding it into something very substantial. And so when you look at a sun in Gemini, and it depends on what house that is sitting in, how it might manifest. I mean, you are a kind of soul who doesn't want to talk about fluff and the peripheral things. You want to get to the nougat. You want to get to the center of something. You do want to uncover why for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because your sun sign sits in Gemini in a Scorpio house. It's an evolved version of how that symbol manifests. So, that's one symbol in your entire chart. There's a myriad of other symbols and planets that are working in concert with that sun sign. And we never even look to the sun first in the work that I do, because that's looking at something, the creative life purpose or the personality that you chose for this life. What we're most interested in initially, in terms of understanding really who you are, is looking at your natal position of Pluto, which is the planet of the soul. And that's really what lives within you, really on the deepest level. And it's the you that's traveled through lifetimes, through all these different experiences. I want to know how you've been touched and reached, what you've been challenged by, and where your hurdles sit, and where you feel most empowered. I want to know all those things. And you can't know that from looking at a sun sign.
Yeah, that makes so much
And I would
sense.
say, yeah. And you are a warrior. You have Pluto in the first house. That's a warrior. You're a warrior for women, I would say.
Huh.
That's why audacity of sheep.
Oh, that's interesting.
You
Yeah, I didn't choose that name consciously. It just came to me one day. So I guess that aligns with what you've said.
well, it's just perfect for your chart. It absolutely reflects it. Instead of saying why me, you say why not? Why not me? Why not women?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so tell us, Kristin, is there anything significant going on in the sky right now that is important for us to know?
Well, there's always something significant. And we had a very powerful eclipse in August that will influence the next 6 years of 6 months, not 6 years of anybody's life, I would say from August till February of 2018. But there was one aspect that occurred at that time that's going to be even more pronounced in November. And certainly we'll feel it in December as well. And I'll speak to that here. The eclipse was in Leo. Of course, everybody knew about it. It was on all the televisions because Path of Totality ran right through the United States. And it was at the last degree of Leo. And Leo connects to our heart chakra, our heart, things that move us from our heart, things that we're passionate about. And it can create this feeling like, for a lot of people, this feeling of having a special sense of destiny. And everybody will feel it in their own way. But if you haven't been living that destiny, it really would have been tugging on you hard, because it would create this feeling that you knew you came here to do something special or important. Maybe you don't feel like you're doing it. And so that can create this sense of urgency and an intensity. But all the energy between, August and this coming February is in place to help you connect with those things that you haven't been able to before. And it can come in through spontaneous meetings or like the eureka moment, the download that comes from out of left field, or the sudden meeting of somebody that helps lead you into your future. Anyway, there was an energy so auspicious and also so rare that hasn't occurred since before we were the USA. It was, before probably early 1700s, if the last time or even before that this had ever even occurred, all told in combination. So it's rare, it's very special. And so one of the combinations of energy that's still traveling right now that I really love, and I want to encourage people to tune into and partner with, is that the planet Uranus, which is the planet that connects to change and breakthroughs and innovation, alternative ways of doing something in your life, or alternative ways of relating and connecting and seeing something, is forming what's called a trine to Saturn. Now, a trine is one leg of a triangle. It's an angle of ease. And these two planets have not been forming an angle like this in these specific fire signs that they are in. Uranus is in Aries and Saturn is in Sagittarius, in hundreds of years. And so what this is about change that can feel secure. It's not, you can do something radical, but it suggests that it's not going to feel like you're running through the world with your hair on fire. There's something that you can do. There's a change you can make that can feel so natural and so true and so deeply in your soul groove that you wouldn't question it for a second. And the thing about truth, Saturn is in Sagittarius, which is all about committing to a path of truth and what feels true for you. The thing about truth is it doesn't require a belief. The truth doesn't require faith. It just exists. And so if you can tap into something that feels true for you, then nothing will become more important, whether it's this is what I want to do in my life, or this is the person I want to be with, or I don't like this relationship. It goes completely against my nature. I don't feel loved and validated and supported. That's my truth. So I want to get out. So maybe someone has the courage to just get out finally. And then they're asking themselves, what the heck took me so long? This is my truth, to be out of something that made me sick, or where I didn't feel loved and validated or loved for who I am. So depending on where these two planets are falling in your chart, it is about completely transforming your reality in a way that reflects your nature, your natural design, your truth, essentially. And so I would say that, if anybody does want to get a reading, I can obviously talk to them about where these planets are landing in their chart. But it is so much about really finding that deeper groove and committing to a path that allows that needle to always drop down into that groove that you want, right? That plays the song you want to hear.
Mm.
A lot of people have created grooves in their life that they don't like, they don't want, a reality that isn't what they wish for.
Mm-hmm.
And every time the needle drops down and that song plays, it's not a song they want to hear anymore. So in order to create a new groove that feels more natural and more desirable, that also takes commitment. It takes courage. It takes consistency. It takes passion. It takes heart. And the energy now allows for such movement for anybody who goes after it.
Mm.
And for anybody who can just feel it and follow what instinctually or intuitively feels best and right for them, and to not question it. Because that answer lives in every one of us, and it's extremely loud right now.
Mm. Oh, this is good stuff. Kristin.
So between now and the end of the year, it's very strong. And lastly, I would say Saturn, which is a planet of our commitments, how we spend our time, how we structure our lives and our careers, even our unions and marriage and anything that is about our devotion, is going to exit the sign of Sagittarius and enter Capricorn by Christmas. And the energy is really going to shift at that time. Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, Saturn naturally rules Capricorn. So it's a wonderful place for Saturn, for all of us to secure the change. And to go, to really commit to something for the long haul, and where all these changes now become like, a pattern, or it becomes like clockwork in your life, so it can become your new reality.
That's great. Okay. Sorry,
So
just
there's
taking all that in.
there's a real opportunity now for everybody. You don't have to be a certain sign. You don't even have to, be born in a certain year, or, everybody can benefit from this combination of energy. And if you have planets, that are aspecting these two planets favorably, you have even greater support at this time. So.
Okay. Wow. Well, on that note, we will take a quick break, and then Kristin will come back and talk with you about a book you love.
Great.
This segment is brought to you by Audible. For you, my friends and listeners of The Audacity of She, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial, so you can check out their service for yourself. I've used Audible consistently month over month to have access to all of my favorite books. To see my recommended list and start your free trial, visit theaudacityofshe.com/books. Again, that's theaudacityofshe.com/books. Okay, so we are back. Real quickly, Kristin, before we let you go, I would love to know about a book that you love. Can you tell us one book that you recommend for women right now, some of your key takeaways from the book, and why it's an important read?
Sure. There's been only about a handful of books in my life that have impacted me in the way this one has. There's a lot of incredible books that I've benefited from that really are about empowering women. But this one is really not just for women. It's really could be for men or women. And it's actually a book that, if anybody has questioned past lives, this was going to be your perfect read for you. And the book is called Threads, and it's actually a reincarnation fantasy. So it was written in a way to be, of course, a fiction, but I'm really doubtful that it is. I feel that the author channeled this book. The threads connect to all these past lives that we've had with other people. There's like a fabric that's woven us, right? All of our connections. And it's It's the reincarnation of Anne Boleyn. And the reason why I love this book is it starts this way. She says, a woman dies and the story begins. And so this book is about Anne Boleyn, who's being executed by King Henry, or he's having her executed. And so she's walking to the guillotine in the first paragraph of the book. And as soon as she's executed, she leaves her body. Obviously, this was a true story. We all know that. In 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed by her husband, had her executed. So in the astral plane, she hears a voice and she's forced to review her life with King Henry. And throughout the book, you travel through her history of her past, all these past lives that led her to the life of Anne Boleyn, that led her to marry King Henry. And the questions are answered, why? All the players in her life that she met along the way. And she's able to observe this from this strange vantage point, right? She's out of her body. And this does happen when we leave our body. We're forced to review our life where we really did well and right in our life and where we fell off the track. And we're forced to look at it. Of course, when we come back to this life, the veil goes up. So we don't get to see all those places where we had made choices we wish we would have changed. But yet we will be forced to make them again. That's just the nature of evolution. But what I love so much about this book is Nell Gavin, the author, she just nailed it, like as close to what I know in my soul is true about what happens in our evolution. And it will change the way that you live in your life with every relationship. It'll change the way that you look at any relationship. It's going to change the way you express yourself and communicate, because nobody wants to come back and do the really hard stuff again. Mm-hmm. We are all in a state of becoming. We are all going to hit points on the path that challenges us. That is what evolution and growth is about. But when we can look at our relationships and our reality and our circumstances and ask ourselves, why did I need to create this moment? And what can I do to evolve beyond this so it doesn't keep happening? And so I just love this book because it reflects evolution to a T. And it will change the way you relate to everybody. And I have to say, I screamed at the end of the book. I really did. I was on an airplane and I screamed out loud because it was so true. How it ended was just so true. That's what I will say. And one of the things that, and true in terms of, we can have a history with somebody and it can end horribly. And yet the veil goes up, we come back into a life, and maybe we question whether we should trust someone or not. But the way it works is that as souls, we are just meant to give people another chance to right the ship, or we are learning to trust ourselves in situations where we need to say no this time, perhaps. And so we all evolve through our relationships, and everything at the end of the day is a choice. That's what we were given. Mars is the lead point in evolution. It's the choice-making planet that says, I want to do this today or that today. Mars will dictate how fast any soul evolves. It'll dictate the rate and speed of evolution for any soul. And it's directly linked with our need to access a certain amount of courage in order to make key choices that reflect real evolution. And so I think, really the most beautiful part of this book, although I did scream at the end, it was just incredibly written, but is when she's in the astral plane and there's certain things in her life, choices that she made that she thought she might be rewarded for. In fact, but because the society thinks, this is good or that is not good. And she was realizing so much about what her society had constructed that was really not rooted in natural truths and laws, right? For example, even though in marriage you'll say, till death do us part, God does not want you to stay in a marriage if you're getting abused. Oh, well, I'm going to do the right thing and be a good wife and stay married to him. No, that's not what a natural God wants, right? Mm-hmm. It's your ideas of what's right and wrong according to God is very different than what's peddled in the Bible in many cases. The Bible was written by men.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things in the Bible, of course, that is completely true, but there's a lot that was, I would say, built by man's design. And, so we got to remember who wrote those pages. And just like playing telephone, the story changes. You ever played that game telephone? It can change.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, one thing that I would say though, and I think, is probably the most important part of this piece in the book where she is in the astral plane, is realizing that every choice that she makes is tallied at the end of the day, so to speak. And there's a lot of things that she did as Anne Boleyn that she realized was right and good and selfless. But it was in this space of evolution, and here she had such a prominent role in society. And it was the very last place that she wanted to be, right? At the center of everyone's attention. She realized that she was way far back in terms of her evolution, that there was a lot for her to learn. Just because of her place and station in life did not mean that she was better than somebody else. And so she was humbled by that experience, in the astral plane, observing her reality and even why she chose to be born into that family. So I highly recommend it.
Okay. Well, that just topped my list.
It's an incredible book.
Huh. Oh, Kristin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I just wish everybody the courage to make the choices that they know they need to do for their own soul. So no more time is wasted. And so they can actualize, themselves and their life in a way that moves them more deeply than anything that ever has before. And I'm certain that, for lifetimes, in most cases, the women alive today, haven't been able to really embody the woman that they are at their essence and, are at their root. And so it's a time to try and tune into what that root is, to water it, fertilize it, become it, take steps toward it again. So in order for any woman to feel empowered in this world and to feel as an equal to another.
Hmm. Well, I so appreciate your time and your perspective. And if someone wants to connect with you, how should they go about doing that?
They can just find me through my website at KristinFontana.com. And I do write a weekly forecast that's free. They want to check that out. Just always try to empower people and inspire others with what I see astrologically going on. Things aren't always perfect in the sky, but when we know what's happening, it helps us to relax a little more, to be patient perhaps in places and to take a risk when we know the time is right. So I just invite people to check out the site, and if they're interested in learning more about evolutionary astrology, there's an incredible site called schoolofelevolutionaryastrology.com where they can get a hold of the teachings if they're interested.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I'll speak firsthand to your weekly readings. I'm sure I've read 90% of them, if not more, over the past several years, and they're really profound, and they always help me so much. So yeah, definitely check those out.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm here again if you need me in the future or anything comes up. And I just want to do what I can to help move the women forward.
Oh, phenomenal. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, take care.
You too, Kristin.
And thanks
Bye-bye.
again. Namaste.
Bye. Did today's topic inspire you, encourage you, or challenge you to look at your own processes in a different way? Join us in our Facebook group to continue the conversation. It's where all the good stuff happens after the show. It's theaudacityofshe.com/Facebook. Again, that's theaudacityofshe.com/Facebook. See you there.